I agreed to the blind date for the dumbest reason possible: silence. After months of working late nights, eating alone, and dodging questions about my personal life, I just wanted one evening where I didn't have to think. My friend Mark kept insisting, saying she was different, saying she was exactly my type, saying fate had a weird sense of humor. I laughed it off, ironed a shirt I hadn't worn in years, and told myself this was just another forgettable coffee meeting. I had no expectations, not hope, not fear, definitely not this. I arrived early, chose a quiet corner table, and watched the door like people do when they pretend they're not nervous. When she walked in, time didn't stop, it shattered. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the slight limp in her step, the perfume that instantly dragged me 15 years into the past. My throat closed before my mind could catch up. I knew that walk. I knew that scent. I knew that face. The woman scanning the cafe. For her date was the same woman who once stood at my father's funeral, holding my shaking hands. The same woman who tried to be strong for me when I was 17. The same woman I had spent years calling my stepmother. She hadn't seen me yet. I could have stood up. I could have left. I could have pretended the universe hadn't just slapped me across the face. But my legs didn't move. She turned. Our eyes met. Her smile froze, not slowly, not gently, like glass cracking under pressure. For a moment, neither of us breathed. People laughed around us. Cups clinked. Life kept moving, while ours collapsed inward. She whispered my name like it was a mistake. I whispered hers like it was a ghost. We sat because standing felt impossible. Words failed first. Then came apologies that didn't know what they were apologizing for. She said she hadn't recognized my last name on the app. I said I didn't use my real photo. We stared at each other like strangers who knew each other too well. The conversation limped forward, awkward and fragile, circling around the obvious truth we were both terrified to touch. She told me my father would have been proud of me. I told her she looked happy. Both lies, both shields. When the bill came, neither of us reached for it. We just sat there, trapped between who we were and who we accidentally became. As we finally stood to leave, she looked at me with wet eyes and said something that broke me completely. I didn't know how lonely I was until tonight. I walked out into the night with my heart pounding, knowing this wasn't over, and neither was the damage. Sleep never came that night. Every memory I thought I'd buried resurfaced, stitched together with new meaning. I remembered the fights with my father, the quiet dinners after my real mother passed, the way my stepmother tried too hard to keep peace in a house already broken. I remembered leaving home the moment I turned 18, convincing myself distance was healing. Now distance had folded in on itself. The next morning, there was a message waiting for me, short, careful, trembling between lines. She said she was sorry. Not for the date, not for recognizing me, just sorry. We met again, not as a date, but as two people cornered by fate. We chose a park this time. Open air, witnesses, safety. She talked about her life after my father, how she disappeared on purpose, how being someone's wife erased her sense of self. How loneliness doesn't scream, but whispers until you answer the wrong call. I told her about my anger, how I blamed her for staying, blamed my father for leaving, blamed myself for running. There was no romance in the air, only grief, clarity, and a line neither of us would ever cross. The shock wasn't that we met like this. The shock was realizing how broken we both still were. She told me she'd delete the app. I told her she didn't need to. This wasn't shame. It was life colliding without permission. When we parted, something shifted, not healed, but understood. Some wounds don't close. They teach you where not to bleed again. Weeks later, I started telling this story. Not for drama, but because silence almost destroyed us both. If this story made you pause, if it made you feel something uncomfortable or human, then you're exactly why this channel exists. Life doesn't follow scripts, but stories help us survive it. Subscribe to the channel, because the next story might not just shock you, it might explain something you've been running from too. The days after that meeting felt heavier than the night itself, like the universe had cracked something open inside me and walked away without closing it again, and everywhere I went I saw echoes of a past I thought I'd escaped, her voice reminding Me to eat when my father worked late, her standing between us during arguments, her quiet strength when my world collapsed after the funeral. And what terrified me most was realizing that time hadn't healed anything. It had only buried it deeper, because when she texted again, careful, respectful, almost afraid, I didn't ignore it. I didn't delete it. I stared at the screen for hours before replying. Not because I wanted something wrong, but because I needed something honest. And when we met again, it was different. No shock, no confusion. Just truth sitting uncomfortably between us like a third person. And she admitted what I never expected to hear, that marrying my father had cost her more than it gave. That she loved him but lost herself. That being strong for everyone meant no one ever asked if she was breaking too. And hearing that shattered the image I'd frozen her in all these years. Because she wasn't just my stepmother. She was a woman who had survived grief by becoming invisible. And I realized my anger had been easier than empathy. Easier than admitting we were both victims of the same silence. And when she apologized, not for the date, not for the app, but for never telling me goodbye when I left home, I felt something finally loosen in my chest, because I had waited years to hear someone acknowledge that pain. And I told her the truth I'd never said out loud, that I didn't hate her. I hated that no one taught us how to stay after loss. And we sat there understanding something most people never do, that life doesn't betray you loudly, it does it quietly, through coincidences that force you to face what you avoided. And when we finally stood to leave, there was no awkwardness left, just boundaries rebuilt with respect. And as we parted, she smiled, not sadly, not hopefully, but peacefully, and said, "I think this happened so we could forgive each other." And I knew she was right. Because sometimes the universe doesn't bring people together to start something. It brings them together to finally end something that's been hurting for too long. And if this story made you uncomfortable, thoughtful, or emotional, that's because real stories are supposed to do that. So subscribe to this channel, because these aren't just stories meant to shock you. They're stories meant to remind you that healing often begins in the most unexpected ways.